Live on Building in Public, and we've got Nikolaus and Francesco, and we haven't been joined by Ludwig, but he may come later or maybe not at all. Maybe some.
He's here in spirit, at least.
He's here in spirit, yeah. But we've got some good people to tell us the story of Kyte. So welcome, Nikolaus and Francesco.
Thanks
you
so much
for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Excited.
Cool. So we got originally connected via Rami Adib, right?
Correct.
And
yeah.
How do you guys know Rami, or how did you meet?
Yeah, Rami was the lead investor in our pre-seed round. So very, very early on, I think we had like $10,000 of monthly booking volume or so. Super, super small, literally just like a couple of guys in a garage. And Rami tried the product. He was convinced very, very quickly, and he wrote the first term sheet, and the first term sheet that we signed. And so very, very excited to have Rami on board. He's been super helpful so far. He's a product guy. He's down to make early bets, and I think that's definitely where we benefited from.
Yeah. And so actually, I guess before we talk specifically about kind of all of the product experience, I'm curious to hear sort of, is there a certain region when you sort of first launched? I guess a strong geographic focus probably matters. So we're already in a region that he was familiar with, or he kind of plucked you out of an experience that he was having, or?
So, we were operating in San Francisco at that time. San Francisco was our only market. That was where everything started. We were going through an accelerator in San Francisco. So that was kind of like the core home base. By now we're in like 4 other markets. We just launched New York last week, which was very exciting.
Yeah, what was the story like pre-accelerator? Were you guys already working together, jamming on ideas, you two, and Ludwig as well, or how did the three of you come together and start brainstorming what this would become?
Yeah, it was definitely a story which evolved over time. We started out initially where the three of us knew that we were all super crazy about the mobility space and wanted to create something new in the new mobility space. And after really pivoting around quite a bit as well, we came to start Kyte, and that was really the time, the igniting point where we started. And ever since then, we've only grown.
What were some of those early pivots? Like, what else were you trying?
Oh, our initial first idea was to create a miles platform across different shared mobility service, like an airline miles platform across services. But we realized very quickly that the market for that was not big enough for the ambitions that we had, and so we pivoted into Kyte.
And was this a set of relationships between the three of you already had kind of known each other from school or friends from before kind of the accelerator process? How did you originally connect?
Yeah, so Francesco and I, we actually did undergrad studies together. So we know each other for, more than 11 years now. And then Ludwig and I, we met in San Francisco. At that time, his fiancée, now his wife. And we're all working on different ends of the, transportation landscape. Francesco with BMW, Ludwig with McKinsey, and myself at Uber for a couple of years. And so we all had our different flavors of that industry. And that's how everything came together, and the passion came together. And I think in general, we were always, all of us were very fascinated by essentially, making the physical world smarter with bringing technology in it and really creating a completely different product and consumer experience in that segment that we're tackling.
Yeah, so it sounded like you're broadly excited about mobility. You all have this common excitement. And can you take us through, what does it look like to go from excitement about mobility? You've got kind of the airline miles, kind of a loyalty idea. Did it happen one moment you were trying to rent a car and realized this could be so much better? Or was it a slow discovery process? Or was it just a whiteboard with brainstorming? Take us through kind of what did that actually look and feel like? Discovery process, or was it just a whiteboard with brainstorming? Take us through kind of what did that actually look and feel like?
I think there were definitely a couple of elements coming together, and like I think with Kyte, we realized finally that the stars were all aligned. I think a few of the things that you mentioned. I think on the one side, yeah, we actually spent a bunch of time, a couple of months in the broader space, and looked at kind of like, okay, we looked at kind of scooters. Didn't really believe in that kind of hype at that time. We looked at like other things in the transportation landscape, as Francesco pointed out. And then I think the other thing that we realized was really, yeah, like coming from this consumer angle, right? And like I think we were all feeling of like, okay, these kind of companies like Uber, Lyft, I mean, what they kind of did with kind of consumer expectations was really kind of like magical over the last couple of years. And we realized, okay, like it's kind of not really, or you can't really imagine to kind of like be without these kind of products right now. But we also realized, basically without having cars in cities around the world where we lived before, right? Like in San Francisco, the kind of, like Uber didn't really kind of like solve, the problem when you still needed a car to get out of the city, right? And so that was kind of like really coming from a consumer first experience into that market. That was definitely the one thing. And then I think the other thing that we realized is that like I think very, very, very clear, very early on, we realized, okay, if we want to build a company, we really want to build something that essentially gives us the mandate to almost work with like really, really smart people together at some point, and like really like go out to just like hire and work with the best people out there. And I think we realized, okay, if we want to do that, we almost have to build something that really falls into the kind of like venture category, right? Like, or in other words, I guess, if you want to hire all these amazing people, you kind of almost have to build something that, if it works, can be really, really large, so that the pie can become large enough for everyone, and there's pieces for everyone to kind of like distribute, right? And so I think with Kyte, it kind of satisfied the consumer experience that we really believed in, and it really fell into this kind of category of like, okay, if it works, it can be really, really big and it can be massive. And so I think that were kind of the check boxes were kind of fulfilled there, and that's that's how kind of we were really committed.
Right. And in the idea of, I think, if I were to try to describe Kyte in my own words, I feel like it's kind of like push button rent a car. Is that kind of like the car shows up to you, everything you expect in the consumer experience that we've sort of learned from other services, how we do our food and how we do taxis, but in kind of the rental car experience. So, is that sort of a fair characterization of Kyte? I guess I should have asked you to say it, but
no, that's all good.
Okay.
So it's pretty close, I would say, with one difference. We don't see ourselves as a car rental company by any means. So what we do is, we create the best way to get a car for like a day, a week, or a month, or even longer. And we start with like daily rentals, and that is like basically very, very similar from a use case perspective to car rental. But it goes like way, way beyond that. And basically our goal is to make it surprisingly easy for anyone who doesn't own a car to get a car whenever they need it. So that's where this delivery piece comes in, right? And really adds value. In a sense, you can think about it like you don't own a car, but you don't have to anymore with Kyte being there, because at the push of a button, you can have a car in front of your door as if you would have driven it out of your garage.
Right. And so it sounds like any kind of longer time period than a day, then Kyte would be the natural place to go. Whereas if you wanted just a ride across town, or you wanted a car for, I don't know, would it make sense to ever get a car for a couple hours to take care of some errands, or is that kind of not really in the purview?
Yeah, for us, it's really like this 1 day or plus time frame that we think about. I mean, Uber and Lyft, right? Like rideshare is there, and it's really good in what they do for these very short trips, inner city trips, and we don't want to like tap into that. That's not super attractive to go into that really grown up market by now. Yeah. But what we do see is that for all these people who have become to get used to Uber and Lyft in the last decade, like they really are lacking a reliable and consistent solution for these trips that are beyond like just like going inner city and going out of town. And that's where we come into the game.
Yep. And I feel like I hear a lot of kind of demographic that, would be less excited about car ownership, but still wants to take those trips. I wonder, is there a specific focus on, is it kind of like an urban demographic that wants to get out to nature, or is there certain age ranges where it's kind of most common, or kind of, I don't know, just like city demographics?
Yes, so you got it right. So our like prototype persona is like 25 to end 30s and lives in the city and doesn't own a car. So that's really the target demographic that we're focusing on these days. Of course, like it reaches way beyond, right? Like people at any age these days don't have cars if they live in the city. So we're not limited by that. But that's definitely like the majority of our customers these days.
Yeah, great. By the way, I'm just going to mention we're struggling with a little bit of the camera work right now, just technical problem on our side. But don't worry if Mishti comes in or out. We're just we're finding a way to correct it, but shouldn't be a problem. So when you talk about kind of the broader mobility space, it's such a different kind of service and experience and delivery model than anything that anybody else is doing in mobility. So it seems like you have, if you can make this experience work, it would be very, very differentiated. And I'm wondering, do you think that the existing services that are like the sub 24-hour services are aware of this market, have considered it, have dismissed it for some reasons, or is it kind of like overlooked or kind of dismissed?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I would say maybe a few points to that. I mean, Zipcar traditionally kind of like went into that market, right, a couple of years ago. I think we can definitely say that their lunch got a little bit eaten by Uber over the last couple of years. Right? I mean, the use cases where you really need a car for like half an hour or an hour, there are actually not that many out there, right? I mean, maybe if you really have heavy groceries or so, if you want to kind of move or something like that. But it's yeah. I mean, how we see the market, it's not really the most attractive piece of the market, and so that's why we decided, hey, we really go after these kind of like after all of these trips that are pretty much at least one day or longer. Right. Out there, and I mean, in general, I mean, you talked about the model, right? We definitely believe that what we're building is pretty differentiated in a lot of different ways. Right? I mean, on a very high level, how we operate very differently than peer-to-peer services out there, or also with traditional rental car companies out there. We pretty much transform really CapEx into OpEx, right? So we don't have any branches, we don't have any infrastructure really, we don't have any real estate. We store our fleet, our cars, pretty much in what we call cloud parking or dark parking areas, so super real estate areas, in our cities, similar to the kind of like cloud kitchens of the world, right? Yeah. And then we deliver them essentially to where they're needed, right? And so we really transform that capital expenditure into OpEx by essentially a delivery only playbook, and that's really how we can completely pretty much redesign the entire profit equation of that industry. And in general, we're actually much more competitive in terms of pricing than the kind of the peer-to-peer services out there, also the traditional rentals, because really that fundamental different operating model.
Right. So kind of what AWS did to data centers and services, I guess, or servers, you guys are doing to kind of cars, right?
Yeah, no, it's amazing that you bring that up. I always Francesco actually always makes fun of me when I bring the analogy and say that we're virtualizing entire fleets, because it's a little bit too technical and a little bit geeky, but it's accurate. I mean, we're pretty much we're allowing essentially vehicles to be really deployed super flexibly across their use cases in markets without any sort of like heavy infrastructure investments, right?
Yeah, I love the idea of converting CapEx to OpEx. I feel like the whole world, anything we own in CapEx should just be OpEx, and we should have access to use it when we want. So I think it's a great framing for the thing, especially if people get into that kind of kind of slight finance nerd style of things.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I guess all the implications, like this seems like it goes deep in so many ways. So one thing you mentioned is you take this previously like dark or like unattractive real estate, or not super hotly contested or priced, and you become the leaseor of that, so that you can have your fleet kind of rotate through that space, right? So it feels to me like there's probably a lot of moving parts to make kind of this service work end to end. And I wonder, when you sort of, I think you mentioned that was it you had already kind of $10,000 of revenue generated when Rami first met you. I wonder how you got all those pieces together. Were you sort of using one of your own cars, or a car that you leased and subleased out? Did you have a parking lot, or how did this all come together? It seems like a huge challenge with so many moving parts.
Yeah. I mean, definitely a lot of different moving parts. I think, the very early days were characterized by pretty much us renting from traditional rental car companies, and then basically adding our customers as secondary driver to rental agreements, really in the most kind of hacky way, right? Like, as you can imagine. And then I think, I mean, from there, we obviously kind of, we went into the different routes and built the different pieces, right? Both on the kind of supply side with the right agreements, revenue share agreements, and BD agreements in place. And then also on the operations side, as you pointed out, like we essentially decided to really make it efficient and really build these platform efficiencies out. Correctly, as you said, we need to essentially have these parking lot leases to then distribute our fleet from them. And I think on a higher level, right? Like, what are I think the kind of the two basically, like you can call it secrets or pieces of how do we make everything kind of work, and how do we make the engine kind of run smoothly. It's really on the one side, I mean, obviously technology, right? Like, to really dispatch drivers accurately throughout the market, to dispatch vehicles, to really create that high velocity engine that allows us to execute on that all efficiently. And then the other piece is obviously the right operating and supply model, right? And so and that really goes into obviously having the right agreements with fleet and suppliers in place that essentially lets them make profits on our platform, right? So pretty much our value proposition to the supply side is, hey, you guys can actually make money by owning fleet and deploying that fleet on the Kyte platform, right? Very similar to kind of like when people buy an apartment and rent it out on Airbnb, right? Like, you guys can actually make money on the Kyte platform with your fleet. And the other piece is obviously really that operating model, right? And like, I mean, we I think over the last couple of months, I mean, we hired extremely strong operators that can really get stuff done in the real world, and managing independent contractors, really that fleet that's obviously a big beast. I mean, we just as of last week, we just hired the former VP of operations from Bird. She's amazing, and she really helps us get to that next level in terms of operational excellence.
Right. And it sounds like the fleets themselves, I guess the Kyte platform becomes an opportunity for existing fleet owners to get additional monetization, sort of think of it as like a channel for them to deliver their product. But is that the plan, is that you work with existing fleets, but you don't build your own fleet, or you're not like you're not owning any of the hardware of the cars, right?
Correct. I mean, so it all started with essentially working with traditional rental car companies together, almost as like a kind of like Kayak or Expedia, like as an OTA, just basically like to utilize essentially their excess inventory, right? So basically only basically they deployed their fleet if they had excess fleet available, right? It definitely transformed over time, right? I mean, by now it's for a lot of our suppliers and fleet owners, we're actually the main revenue channel for them already, and they basically have dedicated fleet that is just operating in our platform. But in addition to that, we also we structured our setup in a way that we can actually have even more control and also financing and fleet power over our fleet. So it's a hybrid model if you want that way. And I think our model in general it's set up to be extremely capital efficient for ourselves, right? That we don't have to put really a lot of own capital in our vehicles. But then on the other side, really balances utilization, long-term commitments, and profit obviously for us. So it's really, I mean, what we always tell, basically put out there is like, hey, we built the platform that can ingest any sort of supply, right? Like we can really ingest a lot of different types of vehicle supply, and that can all basically make money on the Kyte platform.
Right. Yeah. We want to ask a little bit more about like top of mind problems now in team, but I also want to just go back and ask you, like, when you had this janky setup with adding second drivers to the rental car agreements and stuff, what was the moment when you knew this was really working? Like, was it an experience with a particular customer or two, or kind of what were those like early signals, especially since you guys were pivoting around with different ideas before? Like, why double down on this one in the early days?
We had a very kind of like lean startup approach to this, and started out with not even like renting out the first cars, but doing a bunch of interviews. So like at that time, we ran around in San Francisco downtown and just like asked every single person we could find and who would talk to us about like their past rental car experiences. And like that was I think the initial insight that like literally every person we talked to had a bad car rental experience at some point.
I just had one like 2 days ago, so
okay, yeah. So that was like very, very promising initially, and then like starting out with a very very, very scrappy prototype, like a landing page, and then like text message based booking flow and update flow for delivering these cars. We realized that people really loved what we were doing, and like called this like life changing for them, and that was really like this feedback loop of very excited customers. Plus, we knew that we were actually solving a real problem for them.
Yeah, who were those like very early few customers? Were they mostly from your networks, or like professional networks, or neighborhood geographically? How did you pilot with them?
It was a mixture of all of this. So it was like we tapped into our accelerator network, like fellow startup founders were in there, and also like they spread the word again. We started to put signs into the co-working space we were working at the time, and got customers from there. But then like really quickly, like it emerged as a like word of mouth loop, basically, where people were starting and recommending to take a Kyte next time when their friends would need a car.
That's awesome.
Wow, so it sounds like some of the initial seeds were your own network and the network at the co-working space, and then it kind of just has gone from there. Is that still the current process? Is just kind of word of mouth spreads? And
yes, definitely. Wow. I mean, it has like a big piece in it. Of course, like by now we're working with ads as well, right? Like
okay,
like if people are searching for rent a car to rent a car online, and so we want to get the word out there and basically fuel that growth engine with that as well.
Yeah, if you've got the sort of the value prop works, you want to catch everybody anywhere they are who could get value from that. So how did you figure out when's the right time to transition from kind of the purely word of mouth stuff to doing more like, maybe it sounds like SEM maybe is a focus if people are looking for that, or maybe there's an SEO component, but very search based. Probably seems like a reasonable way to think about finding demand for this. So how do you think about like when the transition is right and how to do that? And do you hire an expert, or did you do it yourself for a little bit? How do you think about that space?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I think like for us, it was like validation from initial customers. We saw that there was like word of mouth going on, and we could fuel that. And then of course also like external validation, right? Like with first investors coming in, that also assured us that okay, we are on the right path and we can start to scale this out. I would say like thinking about other founders, right? And what I would recommend there is like ads are a little bit like a drug. It's easy to turn them on, but it's difficult to turn them off. So like having that in mind, we try to really like delay that as much as possible for us, because we knew like we would build such a strong foundation of people who come through word of mouth that if we can fuel that will go a long way.
Mm-hmm. And do you think about content at all with respect to sharing the word, like either telling the stories of how people use this, or other mechanisms of like getting people's kind of post customer experience kind of published somehow to help the world learn about kind of the magic moment here?
Yeah, good point. So what we do is like sporadically we share some of these stories on our social accounts, right? Like on Instagram, we do some posts from customers. So that's the way we do that. I think like one other like kind of like hacky mode that we also did early on already is like we looked at other like car rental companies and basically poached people from there who had a bad experience. And told them, hey, like, by the way, there's a better experience and better alternative out there. Why don't you try Kyte?
Right.
And maybe one thing to add here as well, right? Like, I mean, one channel and one aspect that really works incredibly well for us is really, I mean, is referrals, right? And it's people telling other people about Kyte.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, so many of our trips are done in groups, right? I mean, if people go out to the weekend, like they have other people with them.
Sure.
So that's obviously such a strong kind of opportunity to create super powerful kind of engagement and referral loops for us in combination with, I mean, the product and the growth team and the marketing team, right? And so there's a lot of potential by essentially having an sort of an offline product in the real world out there where people actually meet together, right? And so that's obviously something that we take advantage of.
Mm-hmm. And when I think about sort of the value props that a person who uses it, they bring in their friends. What are the value props that somebody might share? Because I usually think of things along the kind of like faster, better, cheaper, kind of those three axes. And do people typically, they express excitement about Kyte because it's like better experience, the thing shows up, you can track it in your mobile app, it kind of feels, the push button nature, remote control nature of that we've come to expect from our phones. So it seems like better would be, kind of better experience overall would be one of the ones. But is that kind of the primary one that people would communicate? Like if I get a Kyte and then I take kind of 3 or 4 friends to Yosemite, am I just raving about the push button nature, or are there kind of like other aspects of kind of the experience, or outside of the better experience, the kind of price or speed or something?
So price is definitely not the focus, like or what people are talking about when they talk about Kyte. It's really about like all around this experience of getting a car as convenient as they've never got it before. Like like it's this push button, but then it appears in front of your door. You get some keys handed and you hop into the car. That's it. So it's so ridiculously easy that people talk about this convenience and reliability of this experience. Yeah.
It also makes me wonder if there are ways to showcase that magic moment, because it's sometimes, when I think about, my early usage of a service like Uber, I was able to like be standing on a corner and I push the button and then my friends are standing there. At the usage of a service like Uber, I was able to like be standing on a corner and I push the button and then my friends are standing there at the moment the car arrives. Like, how did you do that, right? And so in the case of Kyte, I imagine I would have the Kyte get dropped off at my house and I would be like, wow, that was amazing. And then the sharing moment feels like a little bit further afield after I go pick them up and I explain to them how good this was. So is there a way to kind of close that gap, or a way to like, I almost imagine, could you create media that helps the person who's having the magic moment share that magic moment at the time they create it? Is that part of how you think about it, or is that a reasonable framing?
It's definitely like the key moment that we found as well in the whole journey. Like this handover moment of the car keys. It's like, wow, you don't like. You not only get to hop into a car, right? Like you get handed this like $20,000 or more worth of asset, just like nothing, right? It just appears there in front of your door. So it's definitely the magical moment that we will fuel even more. I would say like in terms of like the sharing or sharing aspect of it. People already talk about this moment, and to either us but also to their friends when they get asked about it. There's definitely more to be done, and maybe maybe we can even make this more real time or more easy to share with anybody they know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking out loud, but I wonder if it would be cool if I knew that I were going to Yosemite, and if I could like list the three friends who I was coming with, so that I was going to pick up, so then they could watch me receive the car, and then watch when am I going to show up at their house. So in a sense, they get like the Uber-like magic moment experience, and they're like, "How did that work?" They're like, "Well, I just use Kyte, so of course the whole thing's easy." Do you think a workflow like that would work?
That definitely works. Yes, like for sure. We already have a feature in the pipeline where you can like easily add your co-riders before the trip starts, right? And share the details of the trips, but also like eventually like split the fare, right? Things like that.
Oh yeah.
Viral component. But then like sharing your trip status and the delivery is another layer that we can add. It's great.
Yeah, I feel like Rami talked to us about like the first time that he was using Uber and like what it felt like and how magical it felt to the people he was with. I think in the Middle East, like one of the countries that had just rolled it out, and they were just like, "Oh my God, like you must be like a prince or something.
Right.
Like, how are you getting this car just rolling up to you?" So yeah, I mean, I think it's really cool to sort of recreate that experience, like you guys are doing now. But I also wanted to ask, like, what are sort of top of mind problems or things that you're processing really actively as a team right now, and not only like what they are, but how do you approach going through them? Like, is it the three of you on calls, like whiteboarding, or just kind of like let us take a little peek into your internal process, like last week or two?
Yeah, totally. I think, I think one fundamental kind of like, I guess like area that is, I wouldn't say it's the biggest challenge out there, but it's definitely kind of like out there is just kind of like how do we really scale out now over the next couple of months from just like essentially our 5 markets and a couple of million of revenue yearly to like really like the next order of magnitude, right? And I think specifically in our space, just given that there's kind of real on the ground operations happening, it's a product in the physical world out there, right? Like there's a real danger of scaling fast, but then basically the quality kind of like degrading over time. And I think other companies kind of fell into that trap that it was just only about growth and scale, and the quality and the experience kind of suffered, right? And I mean, there's so many pieces that need to be right for the perfect Kyte experience, right? I mean, the car needs to be on time. You have to feel the customer support if you have a problem. Like obviously the product experience has to be great. Right? Like all of these different things, the car needs to be clean, right? Like all of these other things need to be right. And I think really kind of scaling that level of operational excellence while scaling the expansion and the company, and that's a fundamental challenge. And I mean, to your thing of like, well, how do we solve it? I mean, I think one thing is definitely having the right mindset, and right, like having really like, I mean, on the one side, I think on the like we put a lot of focus on really engineering product excellence, but we also put a lot of focus on really that operational excellence, right? And like, and really driving the metrics in each market, really essentially having this mindset of like, yeah, like we want to get 1% better pretty much every day in every single metric, right? And that over time, I think then other companies in that space have proven that really, that's an important mindset to have. I mean, for example, like DoorDash, right? I mean, they're definitely one of these companies I think that we always admire out there, of like, also started with a very kind of crazy idea, also in the ground. But yeah, like this mindset of like getting better every single day and all of these metrics, that kind of drives ultimately, I mean, this is driving compounding effects over time. And I think the other piece of like, what are we doing? I think it's just, I mean, bringing the right people on board that know what they're doing, that can take over ownership, right? I mean, I think just now with our 2 most recent hires, with Chandra from Bird, as well as then our head of growth marketing, who was previously at Postmates and GetAround. I mean, just people that have seen things in that space before, people that can really own things, that can build teams, that can lead entire things, that can just like run, and are true leaders. I mean, it's just a game changer, right? Then that really kind of like is necessary at that point in the company.
Can we talk a bit about kind of markets and teams? So I know you started in San Francisco, and you're talking about trying to get kind of a market by market focus before you try to scale too much. So are you still focused on San Francisco alone, or have you sort of expanded to a couple other places? And then kind of related to that is each market has its own team focus. And how do you think about, I think like over time, Uber and Lyft had very different approaches at the beginning for how they would scale. And I wonder if you sort of think about scaling from some of the lessons you might have learned from how those companies work, maybe Bird or Postmates.
Yeah, great question. I mean, San Francisco, it's still our biggest market out there. It's still a very important market for us. But yeah, I mean, we expanded to a few other markets by now, right? We started with Los Angeles in the beginning of COVID-19 last year. We started expanding into LA, then Boston and Washington DC, and now as of most recently New York. I would say with every additional launch, we kind of refined our launch playbook more and more, right? Like the first launch was obviously everything was crazy. We kind of built the V0 of the kind of like playbook, the Kyte playbook, and then we tried to really update and make that playbook better and better over time, so that essentially every launch can get smoother, and we can also launch faster now this year and this summer. I think in terms of how do we think about these markets and how does it all work together? I mean, I think fundamentally we do believe in the kind of like I would say kind of mindset that kind of comes a little bit from Uber of like, hey, like our general managers in the markets, they're pretty much city CEOs, right? Like we want to give them a ton of autonomy and really run the show there, own their P&L, right? Like they're responsible for really their revenue growth, their defect rates, all of these things. But on the other side, it's always, I mean, it's a super interesting discussion always. Like you also don't want to replicate too many things on the market level. Like the right things you want to kind of keep centrally and really build these efficiencies out, right? And for us, I mean, these are things like customer support, claims, right? Obviously a lot of the kind of like infrastructure, a lot of marketing, that is kind of guided and steered and supported from essentially the central team. But yeah, I mean, I think also to your question, it's very interesting. We always, I mean, we're having a ton of other people on board from kind of as advisors, investors, from kind of the Ubers, the Birds of the world, and Lime, for example, Toby, the co-founder CEO of Lime, he's an investor. Every transportation company, I think, needs to kind of figure out their own kind of operating model here. Right? Like there's not a blanco vanilla template, and like it's a very different business than Uber. It's a very different business than scooters, and so we also have to kind of create our own framework here, how we do that and how we expand.
And what does the team like scale look like on the sort of centralized service versus the city by city breakdowns?
Yeah, I mean, on a very high level, I mean, across the company, we're roughly around 30 people these days. The majority of the team is based in San Francisco, and then we do have actually a very strong engineering and product team and organization in Germany. I mean, all three founders were German. We have a very great access to talent there. It's one of the things we really believe in it. They're amazing engineers there, and very, very great talent density there. And so that's what we decided on pretty early on, to have an engineering team there. And the thing with the markets is, right, like, in general, we can scale markets very, very essentially, very lean, right? Like we don't need a ton of people kind of on the ground. I mean, as you can imagine, right? Like, like we need to kind of find a lot, have supply relationships in place, onboard our kite surfers, our delivery drivers, and we can really start essentially expanding into the market, right? Like we don't need a bunch of kind of infrastructure, or we don't need kind of people and also drivers like all distributed all across the city, like maybe like something like Uber or Bird would need, right? Like we can really we can scale a city to a couple of hundred cars with actually just pretty much one or two people, which is pretty amazing, right?
Yeah. And does a kite surfer, that's the name of a person who picks up a car from a depot and delivers it to somebody's home? Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
And does that person is like a contractor with the company? Is that sort of the relationship?
Correct. They're independent contractors, value the flexibility of the gig, you know. Yeah.
And are they how do they then get, after they've dropped off the car, how do they get back to wherever they go? Are they doing a bunch of these runs at once, or do they go back to the depot and wait for the next one? Or they
Yeah, so most of them have their own scooters out there, which definitely is one of the things. I mean, over the last couple of years, right? I mean,
Yeah,
scooters expanded in kind of range, battery life.
yeah,
So that's definitely, like scooters, popping them in the trunk, popping them out, and kind of scooting away. And I mean, we have a lot of data that actually shows that really increases
right.
increases essentially their productivity and how they can do trips.
That's pretty
That's
cool.
so smart. Yeah, I saw that happening in China actually. I thought it was the smartest thing. But there, people were, I think, were mostly using it for like drunken nights out. They would hire someone to come drive their car home
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then take the scooter and go. But so
yeah.
smart. Yeah, that's really cool. And like you guys said that you were hiring a lot. What, if anyone's watching this, like what kind of things are top of mind that you're trying to solve for? What kinds of people are you looking for to fill the team?
Yeah, I mean, well, in general, everybody's always hiring engineers. That's definitely out there. But also across other functions, we're hiring a lot. We're hiring amazing operators on the growth and product side. On the leadership side of things, we're hiring for a head of finance, head of supply, and then head of engineering. So yeah, if anybody has leads or ideas there, that's these are exciting positions that we're filling, and that's both across the US as well as in Germany. So definitely exciting to keep looking for the right candidates there.
And it sounds like you have kind of this US Germany kind of as, let's call it like hubs, like almost HQ like hubs, and then other cities that you mentioned where there's kind of an operational component, but maybe not as hubbed as those other two. So do you imagine that those two hubs, maybe San Francisco and Germany, become like the future of the company for a long time? Will continue to sort of expand around that? Or do you also look at more distributed models of working, or kind of does remote work play a role in kind of the future of how you build Kyte?
I would definitely say we also adopted our kind of view on that throughout last year, throughout COVID. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think we're very very remote friendly. We have also other people kind of from other parts of the world that works very greatly. I think ultimately we believe in some sort of a hybrid model, right? Like with some sort of in-phase time. I mean, we do believe in the value, the serendipity of whiteboarding sessions and being in an office and being together and having dinners together, all of that. But kind of like paired with a really flexible approach. And I think long term, I would say how we're imagining it is really some sort of both San Francisco as well as Germany is kind of like the kind of like big building blocks, but then also have that I guess like that, or like micro hubs kind of throughout the world kind of being added to that. So for example, I definitely think we'll have a kind of East Coast Kyte hub in a reasonable future in the next couple of months, maybe New York, maybe Boston, and then probably also another SoCal hub, potentially LA as one of our biggest markets as well, and to really have some sort of or give people the opportunity to also being remote, but also being in the office kind of across the country. So that's kind of like a model that we think could work well for us.
And do you think any of the functions would end up needing to centralize? Like you mentioned, you have a lot of technical network in Germany, so that has a lot of engineering office, but do you also run engineering, some engineering roles out of San Francisco or maybe potentially LA in the future?
Yeah. We also have engineering presence in the US, and that works really well. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it seems like you've done a great job of recruiting people with a lot of functional and kind of domain experience, even though the problem you're solving is new. So people from Bird and Lime and Postmates who are participant. I wonder, is there a certain profile of people that you're looking for? Like when it comes to engineering, is it kind of generalist skill sets, or are there aspects of mobility or kind of real-time on-demand experience that is helpful for thinking through some of the engineering problems?
I mean, I think in general, we always value some sort of mindset, attitude, intelligence, smartness a lot more than experience. So no, we're not just going out to hire for like the usual kind of brand names in that industry. I don't think we're kind of thinking about it in that way. I mean, some kind of domain experience, it's useful, specifically on the kind of like operating side of things. Obviously, in general, I mean, I think the kind of the two kind of principles and values that we always put out there that I can mention here is like definitely some sort of like the ambition level and the hustle. I mean, I think we expect a lot from people, and yeah, that's part of the DNA, and I do think we believe in that, and we want people to kind of think big and really go all in. But then that paired with kind of, I would say, the general kind of like humbleness. I think it's something we really believe in, a kind of constant culture of like learning, getting better, just kind of being generally curious, really kind of like like really wanting to learn and improve themselves. So I think these two things are mainly kind of like the core things that we're looking for when we want to bring people on board. And then there's obviously a lot of other pieces and functional skills and everything, but I would say these are probably the two big ones.
Yeah,
How do you?
I actually want to ask a little bit about the learning part because, especially as the three of you like kind of at the top of the company, I imagine it can sometimes maybe be hard to get like very critical or like pushback from other people in the team, especially as you grow and the organization gets a lot bigger. So how do you think about that in terms of like, are there things that or experiences that you can recall where the three of you, like someone has pushed back on some decision that's like changed the trajectory of what you ended up doing, or basically like how do you think about cultivating that within the org?
Totally, yeah. It's definitely a thing we thought about very early on when we were like less than 10 people already, and I mean, I wouldn't say we're perfect in that, but we've taken some measures that seem to work quite well. One of which is, for example, that we've started with implementing a team barometer. So once a month, basically, it's an anonymous survey where everyone in the team basically responds to our values that we've put together, and so we can see like, are we on track over time as well to live up to these values that we have set out. And one of these values, just to call it out, right, is like the best idea wins. So also generally, like in the everyday operations, we really like emphasize that like it's not about like titles. It's really true meritocracy, where the best idea in the room should win. And like that's one thing. I think it goes beyond like also like team-wide things, but also like in one-on-ones, of course, like we try to get the feedback from every single person in the company and in the team.
Are there any aspects of culture that you specifically nurture, certain activities that you nurture, like maybe a speaker series or one-on-ones, the way you conduct them, or kind of other feedback, but that feels like it's pretty unique to how the Kyte kind of like employee experience works?
I mean, I think we're, and Francesco, feel free to kind of chime in afterwards as well. But like one thing that we definitely, I think everybody that starts like tells us after like 1 or 2 weeks of like oh, like this is pretty unique in terms of like how direct we are with kind of like feedback and really like, I mean, pretty much after every meeting, after like bigger calls with other external people, like we really give us like immediately feedback, like in Slack, or I mean, we have a special format for that as well in like our essentially 101 OKR tool. But like it's pretty, for some people it's a little bit unusual and uncomfortable to kind of like get thrown into that. And well, they always say, well, like it's because like like you guys are 3 Germans and you guys are very direct. But I mean, it's really something that we try to kind of like nurture, and I think ultimately it does build the right culture of kind of like trust, transparency, and kind of like really pushing us kind of like to get better. I don't know, Francesco, if you have another visible example.
I think like one other thing which we keep mentioning a lot within the team is ownership, right? It's this sense of ownership, and like one of the 3 big values we put on the walls is it's your company and yours in all caps. And so we like try to really like make everyone an owner of whatever they're doing, and this level of ownership comes more naturally. Also, this openness to share feedback if things are not going the way they should be. So I think that is another aspect.
Right. So the ownership is another piece that's a big piece.
Yeah.
Have you ever had any examples of things that you've sort of changed your mind on with respect to sort of how the company operation should work? So is there maybe it's like when you were 3 people, you thought it would work one way and you assumed it was going to grow up as a kind of amplification of that. And then along the way, maybe at 10 or 15, you said, actually, we need to retool this idea or this process, or it's not going to work, getting from 15 to 30 or beyond.
I mean, I can start with one thing where I definitely changed my opinion about it as well is really the kind of and really throughout last year the kind of like, I guess, like in office versus like remote culture. I mean, we talked a little bit about it already. I think very early on we really believed in like, hey, like we all need to be in the same place all the time, and it's not great if we're kind of if people are across the world. And we're pretty strict with kind of enforcing that. I mean, there were some exceptions with kind of some contractors that were already kind of remote before. We were like, okay, that's okay. And I think by now, I mean, I think we've kind of proven to ourselves last year that that it really can work in a hybrid setup. That we do want to be that we want to be respectful of kind of like people's preferences, that we kind of don't want to limit us to just kind of like San Francisco talent. So I think that's definitely something I think where we really changed our mind, and we kind of developed as a company.
Yeah.
Do you feel like your investors have generally agreed when you make that kind of move, or do they sometimes push back and think you're a little bit crazy for doing such a thing? Or
no, honestly, I think for example, the Munich office, like I mean, most people really say, hey, you guys are really smart. Like you guys don't need to pay. I know you guys don't need to match the Google salaries in San Francisco, and like let's just it's like you guys can you guys can kind of play your strength card here. Because you have that access to the kind of German talent pool, like it totally makes sense. So most people really see that, and I mean I really think that we can kind of get the best of both worlds by having a San Francisco HQ present. I do believe there's still value of being in San Francisco, even though the whole world is saying that VC is moving to Miami or somewhere else. I think kind of SF HQ presence, it's still valuable from a kind of company presence fundraising perspective, but that really being augmented by some sort of additional talent pool out there. Yeah,
that's cool. I know we are nearing the hour, but there's one question we always like to ask, which I'm very curious to hear your answers to, which is basically that zooming out, what are you guys both most curious about today? And it could be something related to the company, but it could also be like totally, something in your personal interest or something you've been reading or philosophizing about. I saw both of you are very outdoorsy. So anything, what's captured your mind these days the most?
So I mean, like on a like company level, I think we are at this point, this like kind of inflection point now where we are hiring like very high caliber talent, and we are like at the start of a golden summer in a sense, right? Like with COVID being over, and so the question there is really okay, like how will the world develop during the summer, but also after the summer? Like how will that continue? And I'm really excited to see that like these trends that got kicked off by COVID will continue to happen. And I mean, we definitely benefited from COVID in a sense, right? Like people were valuing this delivery service, but this is a trend that will keep happening. And so I think it's a huge opportunity right now to tap into that and double down.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So I recently started reading this book Anti-Fragile from Nassim Nicholas Taleb. I mean it's pretty out there. I feel like almost embarrassed that I haven't read it so far. But I mean, and it talks about anti-fragility and kind of black swan events, right? And kind of like like basically how to deal with kind of crazy, unforeseeable kind of like events as a company as well. And I mean, obviously that was very kind of relevant throughout COVID, right? And kind of there were a lot of companies kind of being heavily affected negatively by it and positively. And I was just thinking about kind of, okay, what does that really mean for us now, kind of like post-pandemic, post-COVID? What, like how do we set up the company in the kind of most more robust way. And it's a lot. There's some element of kind of like risk management. I mean, right, like for us, it's always about kind of demand and supply, and about kind of utilization, and about kind of commitments on the supply side. And so there's a lot of interesting kind of like parallels here. Essentially, how to set up the company really for massive scale, and think about risk in the right way. And I thought that was very interesting, and I want to put that into a little bit more structure for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely look forward to seeing how that translates as the company grows. But this has been awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you for spending the time with us.
Cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was fun.
And we'll put together some highlights, and we'll share them out on Twitter, so you can get some of these best moments shared out, get the story out there. Okay.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great day.